Welcome back to Skill Up with Dan channel. In this particular session, we'll talk about PowerShell features. See, when we say PowerShell features, there has been a lot of enhancements and a lot of new functionalities and features that has been getting added to the PowerShell versions on Windows PowerShell version 1 to 5 and also in PowerShell Core 6 and the current one PowerShell 7. So there are a lot of features. So what I'll do now is I'll try to list down the top 5 or the top 5 to 7 features in each of the version, and there has been 2 decades of enhancements, right? So the first PowerShell version came way back in 2006 or released in 2006, but it was introduced in 2003. So it's almost 20 years. There has been a lot of new features and functionalities. So I'll start with maybe Windows PowerShell version 2. That was the second version, right? So this was actually it was integrated to your Windows Server 2008 R2 operating system, but then it was available even when we had Windows Vista with Service Pack 1 and Windows 2003 Service Pack 2 and Windows XP Service Pack 3. So you can install on Windows Vista SP1, Windows 2K3 2003 SP2, and even on XP, Windows XP, the client version SP3. So, but then it was integrated to your operating system in 2008 R2. So the features that I started liking is, so they actually added the PowerShell ISC, which is integrated scripting environment, where you can go and start writing the scripts within your PowerShell console. So you can just go to your system and you can start checking for the ISC, and you have the option to write your scripts directly within the PowerShell console. Earlier, we have to go and write the script externally, like your command prompt, where you have to go and use your notepad or any other editor, and then you have to compile the script. But now you can just go and type your scripts here, and then it's part of your integrated environment. And then the second beautiful thing that I like is the PowerShell remoting, right? You can start taking the remote of the machines, and you can run the scripts in the remote machine using the Windows WS management. The PowerShell 2 allows scripts and commandlets you can invoke on the remote machine, and you can start running the scripts in multiple machines. And then the next beautiful thing is on the background job option. Okay, so you can run your sequence of commands. There are 2 different blocks, or there are many, but then PS job and PS transaction. So you can start running the sequence of command in multiple machines, local and multiple remote machines, and the job can get executed on the back end itself. So you don't have to run it in the foreground and get the output. So the PowerShell version 2, it started supporting background jobs, and even you can start having scripts that can be debugged. Okay, I'll talk about the breakpoints, debugging, and all those things a little later. Even I'll talk about few more examples on how to do it. So even in PowerShell version the ISE, you have something called debug option, and also you have the breakpoints. I'll talk about the breakpoints and the toggle breakpoint later in the session, but breakpoints can be set on a set of lines or a set of columns, and you can execute the command with better control. Okay, so script debugging and the breakpoints options were introduced along with the ISE. And you also have the option to go and transfer the files using the PowerShell. It started supporting network file transfer. And the next beautiful option that I liked is the modules. Okay, they started organizing and partitioning the PowerShell scripts into something called modules. So modules, you can consider that as a self-contained or reusable unit. For example, they had partition modules for Active Directory, SharePoint, NetApp, and a lot of different things. So modules can define a restricted run space environment where you can go and execute the script. And this was introduced as part of the PowerShell version 2. So these are the top 5 or 6 options that I really liked, and even they added a few more things like the script commandlets. They call it as advanced functions or whatever. This is definitely getting better shape in the newer versions, but it was available in even version 2.0. And then when you talk about version 3.0 PowerShell, again, I'm talking about the Windows PowerShell 3.0. In 3.0 version, I think it got natively integrated into Windows 2012 operating system. It's a 2012 server operating system. We call it as Windows Server 2012. And on the client side, you had the equivalent of Windows 8, right? So when Microsoft started releasing operating systems since 2008, they started releasing parallel operating systems with the same backend kernel for both server and client operating system. So which made things simpler for PowerShell as well. So you can have the same set of commandlets for both the server operating system and the client operating system. So even though it is made available for version Windows Server version 2012, you can definitely go and install it on 2008 SP1, Windows 7 with SP1, and the Windows 2008 R2 with all SP1. So Service Pack 1 is really needed for your 2008 and 2008 R2 and Windows 7. So all of these operating system, it definitely needed Service Pack 1. So, and one more beautiful thing, the PowerShell was added as part of the Windows Management Framework. So it was an internal part of the Windows Management Framework package, where it had the PowerShell and then the WinRM for remoting. So all these things were part and parcel of your Windows Management Framework. So if you go and install Windows Management Framework version 3, automatically the PowerShell and the necessary related items will get installed. So earlier in the previous version, I talked about the background jobs, right? But then in version 3, they added scheduled jobs like your cron and like your, you can also go and run scripts in the future using the Windows task scheduler infrastructure. So you can preset the time and date, and if you want to run something on the weekend, you can schedule the jobs using the PowerShell version 3. And you can also go and enable session reconnectivity or session connectivity. So if you're working on something in the office environment, and if you want to go home and continue the work, so you can disconnect and reconnect the sessions both in the local machine and even on the remote machine. Even if there is a small network failure, or if you're disconnecting your machine and reconnecting, you can go and continue your session. I'll show some examples of that in the upcoming sessions. But now you had the beautiful option of going and continuing your work when you disconnect the official network and go and start your work from the home network. And the next good option, they added a lot of help documentation. Okay, the update help option was added as part of the version 3, and you can have the latest documentation, help documentations available in version 3. And also you have the option to go and delegate your administrative tasks to some of the persons, or you can go and delegate it to the users who does not have permission to execute certain things. So delegation option was introduced in version 3. And they also added IntelliSense in your ISE. IntelliSense is nothing but your automatic command completion. If you start typing something, it automatically completes the snippets, or it automatically completes the command. And even there is an option called snippet. I'll talk about snippet separately. So snippets is again which simplifies typing certain commands or modules again and again. It auto completes stuff. Okay, so improved code writing is what I'm trying to convey here. So you can write your code without memorizing anything, automatically using your IntelliSense and the snippets. So it automatically completes your code. Okay, so it was part of your version 3. One more option, I would say, the modules are auto detected in version 3. So whenever you are typing a command, automatically the modules will get loaded implicitly on on that particular system. So automatic module detection. So you don't have to go and explicitly call out the module, or you don't have to load it. It automatically gets loaded whenever you execute some command. See, with all this said, even though I'm just adding a lot of new things, so definitely there has been a lot of new commandlets, new modules, new snippets, a lot of things are getting added in the backend. Okay, I'm not going to get too deep into each and every commandlets or number of commandlets in each of the version, but definitely new commandlets got added in each and every version of PowerShell, and new modules were added to support both Microsoft native applications like Exchange, SharePoint, Skype, and so on, and even third-party applications like NetApp, VMware, and other products. Okay, with PowerShell version 4. Okay, so these are some of the features that I really enjoyed and started working on it. Okay, so that's the reason I'm limiting myself to 5 to 7 points here. But then you have many other enhancements or features that were added. Okay, in version 4.0, this was part of your Windows 2012 R2 operating system and your Windows 8.1 client operating system. So here it can be installed in your 2008 R2 SP1, R2 Windows 7, Windows 2012. It's there. Okay, and this is I'll try to relate the previous ones. See, for example, you can update the help file, right? But then you have to do an online update in all the machines. But then in version 4, they gave the option to go and update your PowerShell using an offline method. So you can go and save the help in one of the machine, and you can install that particular modules or help documentations in multiple remote computers. And also they started adding the execution policies. Okay, so they have the different execution policies like unrestricted, remote signed, and so on, right? So by default they had this remote signed execution policy in version 4, and they also added a beautiful thing called desired state configuration. So if you want to have something um, in your deployment and management of configurations, so they use something called DMTF standard. Okay, desktop management task force configuration standard was inherited to your PowerShell. So PowerShell also started supporting DSC option, desired state configuration. So the other one I would say is on the what do you call the pipeline variable switches. Okay, so if you want to use some ubiquitous parameters, so it started supporting the pipeline variables. Okay, the next one is the network diagnostics. Okay, so you can go and do a diagnostics of your physical servers, or you can go and connect to Hyper-V virtualized network switches. So it started adding a lot of network related diagnostics features as part of your PowerShell, and they started adding a lot of syntaxes, methods like where, for each, and where and for each are the most beautiful things, where you can go and filter things, iterate over objects. So these two syntaxes is very powerful, and it was added as part of version 4. Okay, in PowerShell version 5, okay, this was the last, I mean, PowerShell version 5.1 is the last version which is part of your operating system. But then PowerShell version 5, it was released somewhere around 2016, and it was part of your Windows Management Framework of 5. Okay, Windows Management Framework 5, and even this one is part of your Windows Management Framework 4. And this had the default PowerShell version 5 alongside the Windows Management Framework. So this was part of your Windows 2012 again, installed by default on Windows 10 and your Windows 2012. Okay, sorry, 2016, I remember. Okay, so it's Windows 10 and Windows 2016, and there were a lot of new features, but it's more on the class definitions and the enum keyword. So those are the things that started getting added in PowerShell version 5. So they were in parallel focusing on how to make this PowerShell product as a public, or I mean as a cross-platform tool. So there were some enhancements. Okay, there has been improvement in how the way the debugging works. So they also had the DSC version 2. They call it as local configuration manager version, where you had much better desired state configuration settings. Okay, and even you have the option to have the debugging happening on the backend run space. So there has been a lot of new properties, methods, and stuffs that got added to version 5. But really, what they were trying to do was they were focusing on how to make this particular PowerShell version 6 available for all cross-platform. Okay, so now as on date, we are on PowerShell version 7.3, right? So we had another in between version called PowerShell 6, which had 3 different minor releases like 6.1, 2, and 3, but it was more for the cross-platform support on different operating systems like Linux, Windows, Mac, and other Unix operating systems. And it was built on top of your .NET Core version. Okay, and it was not that successful, and it was not intended as a replacement for your PowerShell Windows PowerShell version. But then the latest one, the PowerShell version 7 and 7.3, they are all the long standing ones, and they are going to have all the necessary features, updates, and breaking changes that can go and replace your what do you call Windows PowerShell. So this is built on top of your .NET version 7. Okay, and it is part of your it had a lot of good features, I would say. Okay, it had improved error handling. It automatically uh, corrects some of your command expressions. It fixed any kind of casting error, and it also had a lot of enhancements when it comes to session management. So when I say session improvement or remoting improvement, nowadays you can natively use the OpenSSH or the SSH, the PowerShell remoting, the PSRP over SSH commands or the OpenSSH commands as part of your Windows PowerShell. Sorry, not Windows PowerShell, Microsoft PowerShell now. Now it is rebranded to just PowerShell. Earlier it was called as Windows PowerShell until version 5.1. But then now it has been completely rebranded to just PowerShell. Okay, in this version, we also had the tab completion improvements. A lot of attributes and parameters gets completed automatically nowadays, and that is mainly on PowerShell version 7.3. And there has been a lot of additional experimental features and so on. So here I already talked about SSH over remoting, and I also talked about parallelization. So we can have a lot of parallel executions happening, and it also supports Docker containers nowadays. And you have a lot of new operators. There is a big set of improvements and bug fixes, but these are the top 5, I would say. So in a crux or in a nutshell, I would say these are the top 30 features that I enjoyed the most in using PowerShell. So there has been a lot of other stuffs which I will cover when we discuss about the different things. But now let's quickly summarize. So we had 5 different versions on Windows PowerShell, starting with version 1 to version 5.1. 5.1 was the last release that was released as part of your Windows PowerShell. Then we had a version which is cross-compatible or cross-platform compatible one, which is PowerShell Core version 6. This was not a big success because it had a lot of limitations, and a lot of commandlets and modules has been unsupported because of its backend development nature. It was developed on .NET Core, and it was a core edition stuff. So it had a lot of limitations, and it did not work out very well for Windows automation. But then Microsoft was able to expand their automation capabilities to other operating systems using PowerShell Core, and they made it a very strong footing on making it an open source product. Until version 5.1, this was more of a closed source product. So it was not allowed as an open source one, meaning they did not release any source code in GitHub or whatever. But then now it's an open source product. Anyone can go and download the source code from GitHub, and they can customize it or try to add any additional functions, modules, and new features enhancements. Okay, so PowerShell 7, definitely that is going to be there for some time, and this is just called as PowerShell. Okay, you can all call it as Microsoft PowerShell, but its brand name is just PowerShell. Earlier it was called as Windows PowerShell because it comes along with your Windows operating system. But now the tool itself is independent of Windows operating system release. You can go and download it directly from the GitHub. You can go and download the stable releases, and you can start exploring the features, functionalities. So yeah, so these are the top 30 features that I just want to highlight and cover. Okay, thank you for listening.